I remember a number of years ago, it was actually about a year before Sarah and I got married, I was having a hard time finding a close friend. But one day after church on Sunday, I found myself in a conversation with someone who had just started attending our church. He asked me to go for coffee, and without even thinking, I just blurted out, "Yes, man, I don't have any friends." Now, that wasn't 100% true. I did have friends. They just weren't super close to me at the time. There was no one in my life I felt I trusted, like really trusted and could relate to on a deeper level. I was a little desperate, but the guy laughed it off and we planned for a time to meet. A little bit later that week, we met up. And as we met, 4 hours went by and it felt like 30 minutes. We were having such a great time together. We quickly realized that we had a lot in common as guys, but more than that, we actually talked about our faith and our relationship with God, which was really refreshing for me because up until that point, I really hadn't had a Christian friendship where I actually talked about God with like a Christian guy. It was kind of rare for me. Well, this actually ended up being the start of a relationship that really, even to this day, this is a friend I consider to be one of my closest friends today. We're still in touch today, even though he no longer lives in Nova Scotia. For almost a year after we met, we ended up meeting every second Thursday, and we would meet, we'd hang out, we would keep each other accountable, and we would encourage each other in our faith. It's a friendship that really has meant more to me probably than many other friendships in my life. I value this friendship a lot, and the reason that I value this friendship is really simple. This is a guy who actually made me better. And when I say he made me better, I don't mean like in a cute like self-help kind of way, like live your best life now. No, he actually helped me become more like Christ. He actually helped cultivate and form the character of Jesus in my life. He challenged me. He called me out. He believed that I could grow into the man of God that God has called me to be. Here's my question. Have you ever had a friend like that? A friend where you think about the person that you were before you met them and started spending time with them. Then you think about the person you've kind of developed into since you've met them. You realize, wow, this friend has actually had a massive influence in helping me become more like Christ. Do you have a friend like that in your life? If not, I would say this, you need to find a friend like that. You need to find a friend who you can laugh with, who you can cry with, who you can talk about Jesus with, and who you can invite into your life to call you out at times when you need it. This reminds me of something my youth pastor used to say. He'd say, "Show me your friends and I'll show you your future." That's such a great line because the truth is this, relationships have the potential to change your life for the better or for the worse. Some of you guys have been having a really hard time. Maybe you feel like your soul's unhealthy. Maybe you feel like things aren't going so well for you. Well, I have a little tip, a little life hack that I want to encourage you with. It's not necessarily 100% foolproof, but a lot of the times, some of the issues that we begin to experience in our lives, if we look around at the 5 people who are closest in our circle and the kind of lives they have, a lot of times that can be an indicator as to why we are becoming the type of people we're becoming. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. I love that. In this series, we've been asking the question, how's your soul? We've been taking inventory to see if there's anything we need to stop, start, or change to help our souls become more healthy. As we've been looking at Genesis 1 and 2, we've seen that rest, responsibility, and restraint are all things God placed in the Garden of Eden to help the human soul stay healthy. But there's still one more factor that we need to recognize as being crucial to the health of our souls, and that is relationships. As God created the world, He made the same observation every day after creating something new. He would say this is good. This is good. In fact, when you read the story, after He created human beings, He said that it was very good. This is good. This is very good. But did you know that in Genesis 1 and 2, there actually was something God noticed in His creation that wasn't good? Yeah, it's true. Check this out. Genesis 2:18 shows us exactly what it is. It says this, "Then the Lord God said, 'It is not good for man to be alone. So I will make a helper who is just right for him. Wow. It's not good for man to be alone? There's an important principle here for all of us. It's simple. We need each other. We need relationships. We need community. It's not good for us as humans to be alone. Proverbs 18:1 gives us a glimpse into what a person is really like when they isolate themselves. Check out what it says. It says, one who isolates himself pursues selfish desires. He rebels against all sound wisdom. Did you catch that? It says that this person, the person who isolates themselves, rebels against all sound wisdom. In other words, one of the smartest things you can do is do life together with other people. And to kind of reverse it a little bit, one of the dumbest things you can do is try to do life by yourself. So, that is actually an idea that comes straight from the Bible. So please hear me when I say, don't be stupid. Okay? Yes, your youth pastor just said that. Don't be stupid, okay? Don't try to do life by yourself. The Bible clearly tells us that's a stupid thing for us to try and do. But people try to do it all the time, and it never works out for them. So like, for instance, I've tried to do things by myself before, and let me just give you an example for what kind of happens when you try to do things by yourself. One time, Sarah and I decided that we were going to try to move a couch from our spare bedroom down to our living room, and I was convinced that I could do this by myself, right? Like, come on, I'm going to be the heroic, strong husband who just figures out a way, finds a way for my wife. I'm going to move this couch down the hallway all by myself. Well, unfortunately, I couldn't even figure out how to get the couch through the door, let alone down the hallway. So after wasting about 20 minutes of my time, I finally humbled myself and said, Sarah, I need your help. I need your help. I can't do this by myself. Now, that's kind of a silly example, but seriously, imagine this for a second. Imagine yourself trying to move a massive couch down the hallway by yourself. You try to lift it up, but it's too heavy. You try to squeeze it through the door, but it's too big. You try to wiggle it around to make it work, but you just can't figure it out by yourself. Well, guess what? That is how stupid you look when you're trying to do life by yourself. It's one of the dumbest things we can do as human beings. And that's straight out of the Bible. That's an idea that comes from the Bible. So, here's my encouragement to you. Be smart. Be smart. Do life with other people. Do life in community. Don't isolate yourself. Because if you try to do life alone, guess what? You can do life alone. It's not that you can't do life alone, but if you do life alone, it's going to be a really sad life. So be smart. So what are different kinds of healthy relationships in our lives that we need if we want to be healthy? I want to share something with you that my dad once shared with me, and I think this is a great piece of wisdom that's really taken the concept out of Scripture. He once said this to me. He said, Spencer, everyone needs a Paul, a Barnabas, and a Timothy. And what does that mean? Maybe you've never heard these names before. Who's Paul? Who's Barnabas? Who's Timothy? Well, these guys were actually characters in the Bible, specifically the New Testament. They were all early church leaders, and they knew each other. They all had some kind of a relationship with one another, but these relationships functioned in slightly different ways. So what do I mean when I say this? Well, first, everyone needs a Paul. Paul was a spiritual mentor, a spiritual father. Specifically, he mentored Timothy, he mentored Titus, and he mentored many other young leaders in the early church. Paul in your life is the kind of person who has permission to speak into the deepest areas of your life. You actually invite them and allow them to share with you what they see in your life. Maybe they see some positive patterns and they want to encourage you in that. Or maybe they see some negative or unhealthy patterns and they want to caution you away from that. These are people that ultimately are going to help speak into your life so that you can cultivate the character of Christ in your heart and in your life. They help you in your spiritual formation. They share with you their life experience and their wisdom. Mentors and spiritual fathers and spiritual mothers can be different ages, but the key is that they do need to be older than you, right? So like your buddy, they're not your mentor, okay? For some of you, the reason that you just keep on wondering why like the advice that you're getting never works is because the advice that you're getting is from your friends and they've never lived through what you're trying to get advice for. You need to find advice from people who are older than you, who have done life longer than you. I have multiple mentors in my life. This isn't something that I'm just, preaching. This is something that I'm walking out, that I'm living out. My dad is a mentor. Pastor Chris is a mentor. I also meet with a guy in his 30s for mentorship on a semi-regular basis. And most recently, I started meeting once a month with my former professor of spiritual formation from Bible college. And this gentleman is in his 60s, I believe. So I have probably 4 official kind of older mentors, spiritual fathers in my life who I've invited them to speak into my life and kind of help me stay on the straight and narrow. The truth is we all need someone like this. We all need a Paul. We all need a spiritual mentor, a spiritual father, or a spiritual mother. So who is your mentor? Who is your spiritual father or mother? If you don't have anyone like this, you should ask God to bring someone like this into your life. I really think it will make a difference. Now, everyone also needs a Barnabas. The Bible describes Barnabas as someone who encouraged others. He was one of Paul's peers in ministry, one of his co-workers in ministry, one of his friends in ministry. They did life together. They were on mission together. They would have encouraged each other, and surely they would have challenged each other. This is like the kind of relationship I think that's described in 2 different instances in Proverbs chapter 27. First, in verse 6, it says that wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. Oh, wow. And then verse 27 says, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. You see, a Barnabas is someone who's willing to encourage you, and they definitely do that well. They speak into your life. They pour into your life. They have good things to say to you and about you and for you, but they're also willing to tell you the truth about things in your life, similar to a Paul. These are the kinds of friendships that make us better. And again, we all need a Barnabas, someone to do life with, someone to encourage us and challenge us, someone to grow with. I have about 3 close friends in my life who I would kind of consider to be a Barnabas for me. But again, I ask you the question, who is that for you? Who is your Barnabas? Who are your friends? And even if you can identify your friends, here's a further question for you to consider. Would you describe these friendships as ones that make you better? Would you describe these friendships as ones that make you more like Jesus? If this is a need in your life, I want to encourage you to pray and ask God to provide for you a friend like a Barnabas who can encourage you and challenge you and help you become more like Christ. Last but not least, everyone needs a Timothy. Timothy was one of the young pastors who was mentored by Paul. Paul poured into Timothy. He invested into Timothy. He taught him, instructed him, and passed on valuable wisdom from decades of ministry to Timothy. So, do you have a Timothy in your life? Do you have someone who you're intentionally pouring into? Someone you're investing in? If not, I would challenge you. You need to find a Timothy. Finding a Timothy is really going to help you learn to live a selfless life. So many times in our relationships, we can become self-centered. We have people in our lives, but we kind of orient ourselves around ourselves. We think that everybody's here to serve me and my needs. And for sure, there are, we need relationships where, they're mutually beneficial. Like in my relationship with my wife, it's a giving and taking. I'm giving to Sarah and she's giving to me. It's kind of like this cyclical giving and taking, giving and receiving. And in our friendships, we want to have that dynamic as well, where it's a giving and a receiving, a giving and a receiving. But the difference with like a Paul is that a Paul relationship is primarily giving to you. But in a Timothy relationship, you're the one who's primarily giving to Timothy. The Timothy isn't there to serve you. They're not there to counsel you. They're not there to speak into your life. In fact, a lot of Timothy relationships will go weird if a person acts like the Timothy is there for that. No, a Timothy is a person that you're really just there to pour into their life. You're not there to get something from them. You're there to give something to them. And here's what's cool. It's never too early to start finding a Timothy and pouring into a Timothy. You can start investing into someone's life if you're in grade 12, if you're in grade 7. I mean, I would say that even elementary school students aren't too young to start investing into someone younger than them. There's always someone coming behind you that needs a Christ-like example, a Christ-like influence. And here's what's cool. You have the opportunity, even now, in this moment of your life, right now, you have the opportunity to be that for someone else. And I think that's pretty cool. Now, this is easy to understand. Paul, Barnabas, Timothy, we all need one of those. It's easy to understand, but it's harder to implement. Here's the deal. It takes time and intention. But if you make this a priority in your life, over time, I believe God will bring the right people in your life, and it will help you stay healthy. Now, here's just a little caution that I want to encourage people with when it comes to this conversation, especially concerning our health. I think that one of the reasons we can get unhealthy in our relationship is when we only have Timothys in our lives, or we only have Barnabases in our lives, or we only have Pauls in our lives. The fact is this, we need all three. We need a Paul, we need a Barnabas, and we need a Timothy. And just so we're clear, you don't just need one Paul or one Barnabas or one Timothy. I would encourage you to make sure that you have multiple Pauls, multiple Barnabases, multiple Timothys. We need people pouring into us. We need friendships where we're pouring into one another. And we need younger people who we are pouring into. So here's my invitation when it comes to your life. Take inventory of your relationships. Do you find yourself unbalanced? Do you only have one type of relationship? Maybe you only have a Paul relationship where everyone's pouring into you, and it kind of makes you feel a little bit selfish. Well, you probably need to focus on growing in a Barnabas relationship and a Timothy relationship. But maybe you only have Timothy relationship and you're just giving and giving and giving and pouring out and pouring out and pouring out. That's not healthy over the long haul. You need to continue to have relationships that you're pouring out, but you also need to have Barnabas friendships where you are giving and receiving, and you need to have some Paul relationships where somebody's just pouring into you. Do you have all three of those kinds of relationships in your life? Maybe you just have one, maybe just two, maybe all three. Well, it's going to be different for everyone. But that being said, here's my hunch. My guess is that the greatest need for most of us is the first one described. My guess is that the greatest need for most of us is a Paul, a spiritual mentor, a spiritual father, a spiritual mother. Here's my tip. It's not that big brothers and big sisters, and when I say big brothers and big sisters, I don't mean biological big brothers and big sisters. I mean, for instance, a youth leader would be like a big brother or a big sister kind of spiritual mentor. And I'm not trying to take the legs out of our youth leaders, by the way. Our youth leaders are amazing and they're doing a good job. But for youth, it would be easy for you to settle for just kind of like a big brother, big sister spiritual mentor. And you should have big brothers and big sister spiritual mentors, people who are, maybe just a couple years ahead of you in the spiritual journey. But I would encourage you to not just settle there. Don't just settle for spiritual mentors who are, in their 20s and who are young adults. As great as they are, I'm in my early 20s, so I'm not trying to, discourage that. But a really powerful thing can happen in your life when you don't just settle for that type of relationship where you're just getting mentored by people a few years ahead of you. Something amazing happens when you actually seek out a spiritual father or a spiritual mother, a spiritual mentor who's older, who's in their 30s or their 40s or their 50s or their 60s. I think with every decade, it just gets richer. I said to Sarah just a few weeks ago before I reached out to this new guy that I've been meeting with, I said, I just feel like I need an older man that I can start talking to about some stuff. With every decade of life, I just think that the wisdom and the impact that these people can have on our lives will just be richer. I think it's going to make a difference. So, why do relationships matter in the end? Nathan Finocchio puts it this way. He says this: It's impossible to become spiritually mature in isolation. The fact is, relationships are one of God's primary tools to shape us and mold us more and more into the image of Christ. And since this is something we're called to, relationships are something we all need to prioritize. So if you want to become the person God created you to be, you better focus on finding a Paul, a Barnabas, and a Timothy. You'll have a hard time becoming more like Christ otherwise. So, how's your soul? Are you feeling lonely? Are there any signals God might be sending your way to alert you to the fact that it's time for you to focus more on relationships? Are there any people you need to ask to hang out with? Are there any people you need to invite into your life as mentors? Here's the deal. If you want a healthy soul, you need to check up on your relationship status. Because without godly relationships, you won't become the person you were made to be. But with the right relationships, you will experience and you will become more like Jesus every single day.